Welcome to Reddit Aliens. People of Reddit, what's the most supernatural thing you've ever encountered? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 17, I went on a boat trip on the lake with 2 of my aunts and 4 of my cousins. My aunt's boyfriend was driving the boat back after an awesome day. It was dark. Out of nowhere, another speedboat plowed into the side of ours at full speed, killing one of my aunts and my 9-year-old cousin instantly, and sent another aunt into the water to be found the next day dead. After I realized what happened, I heard screams from the dark water. It was the driver of our boat, with my other baby cousin in his hands trying to swim back. He said he couldn't feel his legs, so I jumped in without thinking, giving him a life jacket, and swam back to the boat with my baby cousin who was alive but bit her tongue in half. She was 4 or 5. When the driver finally made his way back to the boat, I pulled him up and noticed both of his legs were shattered, bones sticking out and bleeding. I didn't even get a scratch on me. Worst night of my life. On a calm early morning in my small town, I walked a couple of my friends home after my party. We live near the Arctic Circle, so it was sunny at 3 a.m. Beautiful weather. As I was making my way back home, I witnessed an ATV accident on a treacherous hilly intersection. A woman and her child with no helmet flipped and tumbled 30 feet into the ditch. The 6-year-old was crying when I came up to the scene, 911 on the phone. The mother was unconscious but still breathing, face down. I was on the call with EMS while giving CPR to the woman, but when I rolled her over, I noticed her head was caved in and blood gushing out and pooling on the ground beside her. I had to reassure the daughter with a broken arm that everything is fine and the ambulance is coming. The mother died in my arms. I work at the hospital that took the majority of the victims of the Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting in Las Vegas on October 1st. I believe it is still the largest mass shooting in the history of the United States. This isn't my personal account. I didn't work here at the time, but the perspective of the hospital employees who did are worth sharing. We actually were just talking about this tonight, so this is a close paraphrase of the exact story I heard. The first hour was chaos. None of us knew it was a mass shooting. We just got paged to the trauma unit for multiple gunshot wounds. There were initially 3 respiratory therapists in addition to the trauma nurses and doctors of us. It wasn't until the 6th one came in that I finally asked the paramedic what was going on. From his perspective, everyone was dead there. You know, the shooting started and everyone got down low, but he pulled up and only saw everyone after they got down. He thought thousands of people were dead, so we freaked out. I called our boss. The nurses called the director of trauma and told him we needed everyone. I remember when they really started rolling in. We set up a triage station outside the ambulance bay. Those guys did an amazing job. If they needed to be put on a ventilator, they got wheeled into trauma, had the tube put in, and then immediately were wheeled off to surgery. The OR was overflowing with patients. Patients were dying in beds waiting for surgery in the hallway. We were putting 3 ventilator patients to a room in the ICU, designed for 1 patient. It didn't feel like you were at work at all. It was like a dream. I was in a place I went to work every day, but all my patients were wearing cowboy hats, cowboy boots, plaid shirts, and they were all bloody. Nurses and RTs and neonatal nurses, general med surge nurses were all down in the ER, doing things they'd never done before, but they all made it work. You didn't chart anything. A nurse was at the PIEX medication dispensing window, looking freaked out, trying to pull meds for 1 person. I told her to grab all of it. We'd need all of it. We immediately emptied it out, and I was going around giving sedation to anyone on a ventilator who didn't already have it. I didn't know how much to give, and I wasn't even licensed to give it, but it didn't matter. There just were never enough bodies to do everything. I would code patients with 1 nurse, just her and me. I'd bag, breathe for them, and give chest compressions at the same time while she started IVs and gave meds. They'd be dead in front of us, and she'd want to call the doctor to pronounce them, but we quickly understood that we wouldn't have time for that. They were just dead, and we had to go code the next one. The ones where only got shot in the arm or something were really nice. They always told us they were fine and to go help the ones that really needed it. We didn't know everyone's name. Everyone had a placeholder name, John Doe, but they'd give the same placeholder to 3 or 4 different people. It took us a while to get that ironed out. After about 2 hours, we had a system running. After the night was over, we had like 110. We had less than 10 left in the hospital, but we never ran out. It just worked. Whenever a patient died, we just took them off and wheeled the machine back in for the next patient. As time went on and more people came in to help, the craziness turned into a well-oiled machine in remarkably fast time. Like less than 3 hours after the first patient came in, we had it down. It was the most impressive thing I've ever seen in my career. We even got to go home on time. The day shifters, who were supposed to come in the next morning, all came in early anyway. Even talking about it now, that night didn't feel like work. You weren't working. You were just helping whoever you could. Worked as a physician scribe in a few different emergency departments. One I remember vividly was a young 20s woman being wheeled in on a gurney. The EMS sent an intern in before they unloaded the ambulance to warn us of what was coming and what we needed. Small rural hospital with limited staff and resources. Soon after, this poor woman is wheeled in and the gurney is drenched in blood from her waist down, dripping off the sheets and onto the floor like a blood trail from a movie. Turns out, she was actively having a miscarriage. After all the groans and screams and transferring her to the bed, the doc ordered a nurse to grab a bucket and position accordingly. Within a few minutes, a fetus about the size of an orange just kind of plopped out in the bucket. I'm still in medicine, but as a 19-year-old, that was a holy shit moment. When I used to work for the county coroner, I got a call to go to a scene on the local freeway at 2 a.m. on Christmas morning. A 19-year-old kid in a little sedan full of presents was racing to make it home in time for Christmas morning. It was super foggy. He shot across the freeway from a side road the same time a giant diesel truck hauling a trailer was coming. The truck obliterated the sedan. When I arrived on the scene, it was insane, surreal. Fog and flashing emergency lights, car parts and Christmas presents all over the road. And in what was left of the cab, a boy, still clutching to the steering wheel, eyes wide open, mouth working like a landed fish to talk or just breathe, I don't know. Paramedics called it. He was dead. His body just didn't know it yet. Most of the car's transmission had ripped through his lower torso in the impact, nearly tore him in half. So me, some deputies, and medics stood around him and waited till he finally closed his eyes and let go of the steering wheel. Then I was able to take him away. I got home that morning and just went right back to bed and laid there the whole day. Christmas has always been kind of weird ever since then. I think about it a lot this time of year. Sorry. I had to go to a hospital when I was visiting home in China. Most medical services where I lived were privatized and needed payment up front or at least a deposit before you'd be seen. Naturally, this meant that many of the less fortunate patients seeking medical care couldn't afford it. I was quite young at the time and didn't really register what I saw until years later. But as we were walking from the parking lot, my mother and I saw a woman kneeling on the ground screaming and wailing like I'd never heard before. We slowed down, confused, but couldn't really understand her until somebody pointed out the bundle in her lap. Apparently, she had come to seek help for her baby, but was either too late or was turned away. The infant had passed away in the parking lot right outside a major hospital. There was nothing to be done by then, and my mother, having realized what we were witnessing, quickly led me away. The energy in that moment was surreal, and I don't think my young brain processed it properly until not long ago when the memory randomly resurfaced. When I was a teen, I was with my mother while she was changing out something on a pool's pump or something. She did it all the time. This time, though, something happened, and while she was working on it, a cap burst off at high speed and hit her in the face. 1 second, everything was normal, and the next she's bleeding, and her jaw is basically gone. She's passed out, I'm screaming, and my dad comes running out only to pass out when he sees my mom. So I call 911, as I look down at the bones on her face, no longer actually on her face, and her face just like split open. I had nightmares for years about it. I honestly thought she had to be dead. Luckily, she lived. She had to have her face reconstructed through multiple surgeries and couldn't talk for nearly a year. And part of the worst of it was that insurance claimed that her facial reconstruction was cosmetic surgery because she had it done by a plastic surgeon, and insurance refused to cover it. It's been years, and I know my parents are still fighting them about it. Insurance companies. I was about 11 or 12, traveling to the coast with my family for a vacation. I live in Namibia, and there is this one stretch of road about 352 kilometers long that is notorious for car crashes. Anyway, we were traveling on this road. I was listening to some music and observing the surroundings when all of a sudden, we passed this minibus that was obviously in a huge accident. I took off my headphones and asked my dad if he saw the bus, and he said yes, as he slowed down the car to turn around. I asked him why we're going back, and my mom then said it's because it looks like it happened not too long ago. So we turned around and went back, and I switched over to the middle to get a better view while my mom was already on the phone with emergency services. I then saw that there was a second car. That car looked like it had been in an explosion. I couldn't even make out what type of car it was. I saw a small fire burning in that car, and as we stopped, my dad got out to go have a look. I got out too. As I started walking to the minibus with my dad, I started seeing people in the bus and an ungodly amount of blood. I got this weird sensation of fear. I knew they were dead, and I had seen a dead body before, but seeing a person torn up like that was horrifying. My dad quickly said no one survived, so we just waited for an ambulance. I kept looking at the bodies in the bus. They looked so unreal. Heads busted open, arms broken. Some of the people were even thrown out of the bus as it rolled. And then the worst part of the whole thing was the car that had a little fire. That fire grew into one that engulfed the whole car, and I started smelling the burning flesh. I immediately got sick and ran back to the car, but it was like the smell had gotten into my clothes. It didn't go away. No one survived. 16 people dead, of which 2 were in the smaller car, and there was 1 baby on the bus. I thank God that I didn't see that baby. Not necessarily horrific, but devastating. After being bedridden for 2 years from a second stroke, my mama all of a sudden wouldn't wake up but once or twice a day. Had nurses come, and they said it was basically a waiting game and couldn't guess how long it would be before she passed. My aunts, uncles, and cousins sat at her house for 4 to 5 days, only leaving to go sleep or shower. My significant other would take our daughter home to sleep at night so I could stay. Watching her slowly fade away will forever be one of the worst things I've ever went through, along with how you could tell she was basically losing all of her fluid because of the smell. She had really bad sores that I think were probably the beginning of her sickness. Seeing all these things on the woman who I spent time with every day for at least 10 to 12 years was heartbreaking. Watching my dad and his sisters lose their mother and my grandpa losing his wife of 50 years was awful. And now, 14-month-old daughter won't be able to know her as I did, but I'll have pictures of them together to cherish the time they got. 2015. I was coming home from a night game. It was about 12 a.m. I pass an intersection. In my side mirror, I see a white SUV, the kind that has back doors over the back tire a bit, the stoplight pole. I guess I went into auto mode and flipped a U and called the police. I parked off-street and ran to the car. I see a tall man walking toward me, muttering, "I think I killed my friend," over and over. By now, there were some bystanders around us, and I told this woman to make sure this man did not look at the crash. Then I rushed back, and the second man, who was in the back driver's side seat, came to me. All his teeth were knocked out in the front. He was bleeding from his head, so I set him up with another bystander. Then back I went. The front passenger was unconscious. I grabbed his arm and remember it being so heavy, tried to find a pulse. There was a bystander there with me, and we both tried to find a pulse. As I looked over his body, I saw his leg. It was broken on the bottom femur, and the bone was sticking out. Then sort of stuttered a breath out, and then the fire department was there. I handed the man's arm to the fireman and told him I can't find a pulse. The cops took me aside, helped me clean up. I had blood on my hands. Then I sat in my car for a while. When I asked to leave, I saw a sheet over the car. I knew he died in front of me then. For a while, I had really bad PTSD. I made myself drive past the spot. I saw blood on my shoes the next day and threw up and had a panic attack. After some time, I found a therapist who did EMDR therapy. EMDR saved me. It helped my brain find the pathways to recovery. Now, instead of panic attacks, I can file the memory away. I still have driving anxiety, and I will never buy a car like that. I also struggle with not being able to express somebody's last moments to their loved ones. I asked a lot of EMT workers how they deal, and they all said therapy and time off.